Chapter 831, Using Carrot and Stick Treatment. Spectre never thought of himself as the world's strongest man. He had encountered many strong enemies in his multiple-decade assassination career, even some he had to flee from. However, the handsome Oriental youth before him right now had a terrifying strength that sent chills and dread down to his heart. He's too strong. He was perfectly aware of the strength possessed by the two brothers, Amos and Amosai. Defeating the duo would never be an easy feat for him, let alone doing it so easily like Tang Xiu. Suddenly, Tang Xiu, who had been beating Amos and Amosai brothers, turned to look at Spectre and asked, "Do you think this kind of beating is meaningless?" "I find it meaningless indeed," indifferently replied Spectre with squinted eyes. Tang Xiu smiled and raised his hands to the front of his eyes. Then he turned his palms upward as two glittering blue crystals suddenly emerged above, making Amos and Amosai feel a sense of foreboding as Tang Xiu penetrated the blue crystals into their bodies. Arg! Tragic screams burst out from their mouths. Their bodies stiffened in that instant, and they suddenly curled and rolled up on the floor with their bodies violently convulsing. Their facial features distorted while their green veins on their forehead bulged out and all the blood vessels inside their bodies suddenly rebelled. The agonizing pain made the duo feel that death was much better than being alive for the first time. Tang Xiu turned to look at Spectre and said with a pale smile, "Since I've come here, you only have to remember one thing, that those who follow me will prosper and those who are against me will vanish. It's better to go out with me than stay in this dark prison or constantly wander around." Spectre backtracked 2 steps, but the dread and solemnity on his face suddenly turned into a smile as he said, "If my guess is correct, you should be a Chinese, am I right? I've studied the culture of your country and read a certain sentence in a book that said people might be somewhere while longing to be somewhere else. Hopefully I didn't misuse idiom. But how are you going to solve this problem? Also, this is the act of punishing others to warn the rest, isn't it? It won't work on me, unfortunately. Even if I can't beat you, I don't think you can stop me from escaping either. You're overestimating your abilities, you know that," said Tang Xiu indifferently while flipping his hand to take out a jade bottle. "Even if you grow wings, you can never escape from the palm of my hand if I want it so. Try it if you don't believe me. I'll give you a chance, then. I'll leave this place with you and go outside to work for you if you can catch me," sneered Spectre. Having said that, his hand instantly slashed the steel door at the speed of lightning as his figure dashed forward like a lightning bolt. Spirit Order Art. Tang Xiu activated a seal as hazy energy instantly shot toward the back of Spectre. His body, which was about to rush out of the door, suddenly stiffened. At the same time, Tang Xiu quickly took out 4 array discs from the interspatial ring and swiftly arranged the 4 divisions array to trap Spectre inside. Break! Spectre roared furiously and his complexion flushed red. The energy inside his body violently burst out to shatter that special energy inside his body, restoring his rigid body to normal. He complacently laughed inwardly and continued his sprint to the door. Bam! An invisible shield of energy blocked him. The force of the huge impact caused the energy shield in front of him to sway and ripple as his body was bouncing backward. Yet, his back then touched an energy shield again, he had rebounded and slammed into the floor. What the hell is this thing? The pride and complacency inside his heart were diluted by cold bitter water. After bouncing up from the floor in the blink of an eye, he turned to look at Tang Xiu with disbelief on his face. "An array formation," answered Tang Xiu calmly. "You're a Chinese ascetic? Daoist cultivator?" Spectre exclaimed perplexedly. "I'll be damned. Why on earth would a dignified cultivator have so much free time to do such trivial things like this? Exactly why are you coming to this prison for? I can tell you about if you want to know." Tang Xiu let out a pale smile and said, "But you won't have any leeway to run away or move once you learn about it. Submit to me and you'll live, disobey me, and you'll die a tragic death." Spectre gripped his fists and looked like he was struggling. Only after a long while did he finally shout, "Tell me then." "I want to form an army of cultivators, so I need a lot of strong people who can charge and shatter the enemy lines for me. The purpose of my visit to Labor Camp 1319 is to purchase a large number of prisoners." "You can say that I'm recycling some trashes here," said Tang Xiu with a pale smile. "No fucking way I'm some waste," angrily roared Spectre, despite the horror inside him upon hearing Tang Xiu's objective. "You're nothing but garbage in my eyes," sneered Tang Xiu. "Don't think that you're worthy of being hailed as the strongest hitman in the assassin world, even if you're a dual attribute elementalist. You're nothing but a cockroach in my eyes, killing you is as easy as pinching an ant. Also, I'll tell you another thing. Some of my men who came with me this time are much stronger than you. They can easily obliterate you even if I don't act personally." "Are they also cultivators?" asked Spectre. "They are," answered Tang Xiu. Spectre was speechless, and the anger on his face slowly subsided. He then turned to look at Amos and Amos' eye twitching on the floor, and said desperately, "I'll agree to follow you, but I also know a Chinese saying that an emperor never lacks hungry soldiers. What benefits can you give me?" The jade bottle in Tang Xiu's hands instantly entered the 4 divisions array and floated in front of Spectre as he slowly said, "There are 2 medicinal pills inside this. You can increase your strength, even if you only take one of them. Of course, you'll have to learn an immortal cultivation technique before you can take these medicinal pills. But I'll teach you a set of immortal cultivation techniques and turn you into an immortal cultivator." "I can also become an immortal cultivator?" Spectre stared at Tang Xiu dumbfoundedly with disbelief in his eyes. "Nothing is impossible in my eyes." Tang Xiu nodded and continued, "Once you become an immortal cultivator and work hard in your cultivation, with the aid of medicinal pills, let alone just surpassing your current strength, it won't be a problem for you to reach the state where you are 10 million times more powerful than currently." "I agree," said Spectre with excitement. He might be a prisoner here, but his identity in this prison was very special. Even the highest-ranking official in this prison wouldn't dare to offend him. Thus, he could leave this place easily if he wanted to do so, despite him being guilty of his crime and sentenced here. Even if he didn't want to be detained here, there were only a few people in the world who could catch him. Hence, that was why he was angry and unwilling to be intimidated. Yet, being tempted with such benefits gave him ecstasy. He was never short on money, nor was he lacking in glory over the years. He had his own way to earn if he so wished to, and he had countless women if he wanted them. But today, the desire of becoming stronger filled his heart. Despite being coerced right now, he was given a chance at a great opportunity. We agree too." Amos's distorted complexion, who was still convulsing on the floor, suddenly lifted, as he difficulty squeezed out those words that stiffly came out of his throat. Although Amosai didn't speak, he also chose to agree. Tang Xiu smiled lightly in response and waved to retract back the 2 blue crystals. After the 2 brothers gradually recovered and calmed down, he removed the 4 divisions array that trapped Spectre inside. Then he turned back to sit on the previous chair said, "I already read all the information on you all. The 3 of you should be the strongest inmates in labor camp in 1319. However, what I want to build is an army of cultivators, and I'll need a lot of men. The objective of my arrival to Tel Aviv this time is to bring out at least 100 prisoners with decent strength from this place." "Over 100 men?" Spectre was astounded and perplexedly said, "Do you perhaps want to cause a prison break?" "Not really. I've always believed that things that can be solved with money never require the use of violence and force." Tang Xiu shook his head. "Besides, my arrival here is a very secretive issue, so I don't want any outsiders to investigate it. So, I'll just have to spend some money to buy you out." "That's impossible." Spectre shook his head and said, "Even if Agostino values money like his life, he wouldn't dare to sell so many convicts at the same time. He wouldn't dare indeed, but that's not true of Gus Gillis and Sander. Tang Xiu sneered, as long as the criminal charge of selling prisoners is placed on Agostino, Sanders' official position will not only increase, but he and Gus Gillis can also earn a huge fortune. Is this your plan? Asked Spectre while squinting his eyes. That's right. Tang Xiu nodded. There are a lot of ability users around Agostino from what I've found out. Spectre shook his head and said, he's also quite a powerful man himself. Although he's a bit weaker than me, not many can stand up to fight him. You will first need to kill that Agostino fellow. But since I already chose to follow you, I'll eliminate those ability users around him. I'll send 2 people to help you later since he's a tough guy, said Tang Xiu indifferently. As for our next move, I still need to stay in this prison to secretly pick the prisoners worthy of my purchase. You 3 can tell me if you have suggestions or those who you can recommend. All right. Spectre nodded. The 2 brothers, Amos and Amosai, exchanged glances and nodded in unison. They had just suffered from inhuman torture and were heavily injured at this time, so they were self-aware of their condition and didn't promise to help solve the ability users around Agostino. Tang Xiu took out 2 holy healing pills and threw them to the brothers and said, take these and your injuries will recover in a short time. Also, I'll grant you each another medicinal pill, but you'll take that pill after you learn a set of immortal cultivation techniques from me in the future. Thank you. Call me boss starting today onward, said Tang Xiu. Thank you, boss, said the duo again. Tang Xiu lightly smiled. However, he did not feel relieved to accept them like this, so he demanded the 3 men not to resist as he cast a restriction art seal on their bodies and fully controlled their lives. At this time, hundreds of prisoners in nearby cells had heard the noises from the cell number 1. Although many of them were secretly surprised that someone would provoke that fiendish devil inside that cell, none of them actually moved to take a look. However, the 5 people in the opposite cell number 18 knew that the one who entered the cell was Tang Xiu. But what shocked them the most was that the screams were not from Tang Xiu, but the 2 brothers in the cell number 2. Chapter 832, Glazed Golden Physique. Tang Xiu stayed in the prison and met with the inmates for 3 days. After learning the situation, he finally made up a list of 100 prisoners. Considering Yuan Ye's request, however, he finally decided to pick some more. His action of 100 prisoners was large already, so picking up 100 or 200 people out of the 1,000 to 2,000 prisoners was not much more. He chose the next batch of people much faster and finally finished the list of 200 prisoners on his 5th day in the prison. Inside cell number 18, Tang Xiu read the list in his hand. Then, he looked up to look at old Angie, Emily, Kathu, Subtanshu. His vision then finally landed on Zhang Xiaohua as he lightly asked, have you thought deeply about going back with me? Zhang Xiaohua was still wearing his previous undisturbed and indifferent expression. Even after he learned that Tang Xiu was going to purchase prisoners from this prison, he was just a bit surprised. He gently raised his hand to hold onto his glasses and calmly said, there's not much of a difference between staying here and going out for me, so why should I go out now that I'm used to living here? After staying silent for a short while, Tang Xiu shook his head and said, it's a pity that your heart has already died even though you're still young. I won't force you since you don't want to go out. Zhang Xiaohua spoke no longer, and his eyes fell back on the books he was holding. Subtanshu wore a scornful look and shouted, his brain seems to have broken, boss. He can no longer enjoy the myriad temptations of the bustling outside world. He's a fool to stay and suffer here. A chill gleam flashed in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. A white light suddenly flashed out of his index finger and pierced Subtanshu's right shoulder in a flash. Arg, shit. My arm. Subtanshu screamed and covered his right shoulder with his left arm. He clearly felt that he could no longer lift his arm the moment he got pierced, nor could he feel the whole arm. Tang Xiu's eyes sparkled as he could sense a fluctuation of true essence from Zhang Xiaohua for a fleeting moment. He's a cultivator? Tang Xiu squinted and quickly grabbed Subtanshu's right arm. As his fingers moved, a thin silver needle was shot out from the guy's right arm and was caught between Tang Xiu's fingers. "You're a Daoist cultivator, aren't you?" With a look of surprise, Zhang Xiaohua immediately smiled and said, "I didn't realize that since you're also from China, you should be a cultivator yourself, as you were able to make Spectre submit to you." Tang Xiu's feet moved in a flash and he instantly appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua. His fingers suddenly extended out toward the guy and the two men exchanged dozens of blows in an instant. "Don't move." Tang Xiu growled and finally sealed Zhang Xiaohua's arms with his fingers pressed on this guy's shoulders, but he looked surprised after his primal chaos force surged into Zhang Xiaohua's body. "The glazed golden physique, and you're also a half-step golden core," exclaimed Tang Xiu with a dignified look as he released Zhang Xiaohua's arms. Zhang Xiaohua's face suddenly changed. The moment he was able to move again, his figure instantly jumped back over 7 meters. With his back against the wall, he stared at Tang Xiu. "Who the hell are you? How can you see through my physique and strength? I once met a guy with a glazed golden physique before. A pity that this fellow died by the hands of a terrifying person when he had not yet grown up. Your cultivation, however, is nothing but a joke in my eyes, even though you're only a step away from breaking through to the golden core," said Tang Xiu. As he finished his speech, a jade bottle appeared in Tang Xiu's hand out of thin air. He let out a pale smile and said, "This is a neonate rupturing pill I've refined in passing, the best auxiliary medicine to break through from the stage of nascent soul to the stage of soul formation. If you're willing to submit and leave this place to work under me in the future, you can have this neonate rupturing pill." Zhang Xiaohua was struck dumb with amazement, eyes staring at the jade bottle and body slightly trembling. He hadn't even reached the golden core stage, let alone the nascent soul and the soul formation stage. Yet, the appearance of the neonate rupturing pill still caused a huge wave in his heart. "Who exactly are you?" Zhang Xiaohua was hardly able to remove his eyes from the jade bottle and looked at Tang Xiu again. "Never mind who I am. At least, you don't need to know that for now." Tang Xiu smiled and said, "All you need to know is if you follow me, you can easily break through in your cultivation in the future, no matter if it's the golden core, nascent soul, or soul formation stages. You can even get to the extent that you can turn feathers into wings that will make you ascend to the heavens, that is, if you have such an aptitude." "Ascending to heaven and become immortal," exclaimed Zhang Xiaohua in shock. He then shouted, "That's impossible. Who on earth can ascend to heaven and become immortal nowadays? I don't think there's any cultivator who has reached nascent soul stage, no?" "That's because you're ignorant," sneered Tang Xiu. "I don't know which school of teachings you hailed from, but I can tell you one thing clearly. There's nothing impossible in this world for me, Tang Xiu." Huff, huff. Zhang Xiaohua's breathing turned a lot shorter while countless thoughts swirled inside his head. He had nothing to be concerned about after getting dispirited by the death of his last loved one. Yet, the words that Tang Xiu said shed a new light for him, a sliver of hope that he could progress further. After a long while, he took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, "One last question. What are you buying so many prisoners for?" "To build an army of cultivators," answered Tang Xiu. Hiss. Despite having a firm and tenacious mind, Zhang Xiaohua was still shocked and frightened by Tang Xiu's answer. Forming an army of cultivators? Was this a big joke or something? It was already extremely difficult for a cultivator to reach a decent level of cultivation. Just how many resources would there need to be to form an army of cultivators? Even if all the resources on the whole earth were added up, would it be enough to be used by all members of this army of cultivators? He thought this was a big no. "I'm going with you." Zhang Xiaohua spoke his piece and his whole being immediately relaxed. Tang Xiu paced forward a few steps and then said in a deep voice, "I will have to control your life starting today if you choose to follow me. But I can give you a chance to regain your freedom. That is if your cultivation reaches the perfected golden immortal stage." "Perfected golden immortal?" Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and mocked himself. Perfected golden immortal was nothing but an existence in myths, something impossible to achieve in the present piece of the plane that was Earth. Having such an agreement with this future boss of his simply felt like a comedy. Late at night, the electric iron gate of Labor Camp 1319 slowly opened as two bulletproof SUVs headed out of the interior. Tang Xiu, dressed in a prison guard uniform, was sitting in the back seat of the second car with the prison's vice warden, Sander, next to him. "Have you arranged everything?" asked Sander, who was feeling restless inside, as he turned to look at Tang Xiu. "Don't worry. I think Spectre, Jin Sha, and Shui Sha are enough to deal with the ability users around Augustino." Tang Xiu nodded and said with a pale smile, "They should be able to drag him out within half an hour. Though I don't feel that relieved with the people you've assigned to bring those inmates outside smoothly. All the forged documents have been stamped with Augustino's signatures, be it a private or official seal," said Sander categorically. "Even the other powerful figures in the labor camp won't dare to obstruct them. Once we get the news that Augustino has been lured outside of Labor Camp 1319, my men will immediately bring out those 200 convicts." "But about the money?" Tang Xiu hooked his index finger and said, "Give me the notebook." Sander handed over the laptop he had prepared to Tang Xiu. After booting it up, he clicked the transfer software and said, "I already gave you my account number. You can take all those men inside once I receive the money." Tang Xiu smiled in response and quickly inputted his account number, and transferred $400 million to Sander's Swiss bank account. After the transfer was successful, he shut the notebook down and said, "The money has been transferred to your account. You can check it now." Sander made a phone call and received a confirmation that the money had been transferred to his account. He immediately nodded with satisfaction and said, "Working with you is great and enjoyable. Anyways, you haven't yet dealt with Augustino's issue, yet you still transferred the money to me. Are you not afraid of any incidents happening? Do you even dare to covet my money?" asked Tang Xiu with a smile. Sander shuddered inside. He immediately shook his head and answered, "I don't. And that's the truth. Relax. Augustino is just a nobody in my opinion." Tang Xiu smiled and continued, "We have had good cooperation this time, so I'm sure that we'll have many opportunities to have more dealings in the future. At the very least, your prison has a lot of deaths every year, right? If you take better care of those convicts and reduce the number of irregular and abnormal deaths, that number will be the basis of deals later." "I understand," said Sander without hesitation. Labor Camp 1319, Warden's Lounge. Augustino had already fallen asleep while his loyal ability users were quietly falling in drowsiness outside the door. There were also two of his most trusted confidants standing nearby, standing guard with guns in their hands. Whoosh! Whoosh! Blood-red light suddenly appeared as two black shadows wrapped around the necks of the two strong men and soundlessly reaped their lives. In the next moment, two resplendent swords tore open the dark space and instantly appeared to pierce those men's eyebrows and throats. Enemy? The ability user's face greatly changed. But at the moment that his figure flashed to the side to escape, a big hand grabbed his neck as though it was a steel pincer. Even a blade of wind hovered and revolved around him. "Who are you?" Spectre grinned imposingly but didn't answer his question as he directly sliced his neck. As he threw the body to Jin Shi, who swiftly caught up with him, the door was easily cut by the wind blade. Chapter 833, Plucking the Hairs of a Miser. Deathly stillness filled the room as Augustino slowly woke up from his slumber. However, his pupils abruptly contracted when a chilling aura came to his neck, causing all the fine hairs all over his body to stand on end. What's going on? He had imagined that one day, a butcher knife would be placed on his nape upon waking up, but he never thought it would occur in his own lounge in this prison. He could feel at ease here with the defense system of the prison and the loyal ability users under his command around. Augustino's eyes shifted as they caught the faint light coming in through the window. He could see the bodies on the floor, the bodies of his loyal men. Spectre patted Agostino on the cheek and grinned, "Hello, Sir Warden. Well, I'm done staying in prison, you know, so I thought it's easiest to have you send me off even though I have many ways to escape. How about you get dressed and take us out if you don't want to die?" A frosty chill filled Agostino's heart. He felt like falling into an icy hole after having a clear look at Spectre's face. Of the entire labor camp 1319, the one that could scare him the most, if anyone, was this very devil, Spectre. Exactly, he was more of a devil than the very devil himself. "You want me to send you off, Spectre, but you don't need to go so far as to kill my men, no?" Although he was aware of the crisis at this time, Agostino still wanted to figure out Spectre's true purpose. If he sent Spectre outside safely, he feared that he would still be brutally murdered in the end. Spectre was a bold, audacious character to the extreme, and there was nothing he dared not to do. "You know that I don't like troubles, and your men will bring me trouble," sneered Spectre. "On top of that, I still have 2 comrades. It's easy for me to go out but not for them, so I can only ask for your help." Agostino turned ghastly pale as fear completely overwhelmed his whole being. Outsiders only saw him as a greedy man who saw money as his life, but he was actually a smart, wily old fox through and through. He could tell that he still had a sliver hope of living if Spectre didn't explain, but for this devil to explain things, that meant there was only one conclusion: there were deeper secrets hidden behind Spectre's desire to leave. "I just want to live, Spectre." Jing strode to the front of Agostino. His hand was like an iron claw that grabbed the latter's neck as he grimly spoke, "Then cooperate and obey us if you want to live. You know what? Killing you or not is rather insignificant for us either way, but if you can give us some benefits, or transfer some money to buy your life, of course, you're more likely to stay alive." All right. I'll give it to you," replied Agostino without thinking. Spectre slightly creased his brows. His impression toward Jinsher and Shueisha instantly turned worse. Little did he think that Tang Xiu's men would be this greedy. Jinsher himself was unaware of what Spectre had in mind. He put the dagger on Agostino's waist and coldly said, "Keep in mind though. The more money, the more likely you can keep your life." Spectre interjected without being salty nor light, "Jinsher, he sees money as his life. It's best not to waste time if you don't want any mishaps to happen. Besides, you can get money through many means if you want it, right? You're not short on money, I suppose," commented Jinsher with a grin. "I'm not indeed," said Spectre. "Well, rich guy, I'll share the money from this fella with Shueisha. We both are so dirt poor that we're like beggars, you know," continued Jinsher, still grinning. Spectre no longer wanted to pay attention to Jinsher. He could see that Jinsher and Shueisha were bent on extorting some fortunes from Agostino as his figure flickered and disappeared from the room. 10 minutes later, Agostino had transferred $100 million to Jinsher's Swiss bank account. Then Jinsher and Shueisha took him as a hostage as they came downstairs, making him call a prison guard to drive a car. The 4 people then quickly left the prison inside a bulletproof car. At a road about 2 kilometers away from the labor camp 1319, Tang Xiu was sitting quietly in the car while watching the car that was heading out of the prison. Then he said, "You can go. Whether you'll be successful will depend on your own ability." After saying that, he directly got off and watched the car leave to the distance. Then Tang Xiu fumbled out his mobile and dialed a cell number. "I'll take the car over here." "Roger. 2 minutes. Mo's voice came out of the phone. 2 minutes later, 4 passenger cars being escorted by 2 black SUVs quickly headed toward Tang Xiu. As the cars stopped, Mo came down first and respectfully asked, "When can those people come out, boss?" Tang Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Within half an hour at the most. More than that means that a mishap has occurred. By the way, is the ship ready to leave? It should be moored and waiting for us at the port of Portoroa." Moo nodded and said, "It's a passenger ship that we rent and the departure time is 4 hours later. The ship originally had a lot of passengers, but it will only provide service to us after we bought it." Tang Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said, "You'll take care of the route to return. Also, I don't want to meet any troubles on the way back." "Rest assured, boss," said Moo confidently. "All the formalities for the passenger ship have been taken care of. The boss behind it is a very capable man, so nothing will go wrong. But I'm afraid that we'll have to think of some other means to move once the liner leaves this country, though. Use the GPS to find a deserted island in the sea nearby," said Tang Xiu. "I must train these convicts before taking them to Clam Island." "Roger that." After the conversation, he walked straight to the bulletproof car parked a dozen meters away. As he opened the door, Tang Xiu looked at Agostino and lightly said, "Do as planned and make no mistake." At the moment, the despair on Agostino's face was even more evident. He could tell that the events that were unfolding were larger than just Spectre escaping from prison. This was especially true after he saw the 4 buses that were parked tens of meters away. Some huge plot was definitely in motion here. "Please spare my life. I've given you my money." Tang Xiu stared blankly and creased his brows as he looked at Jin Shi. "Well, we've been dirt poor recently, boss," said Jin Shi with a grin. "We kinda extorted this guy for $100 million, but I'll send the money to you when we get back." Tang Xiu couldn't help but burst into laughter and said, "To make this guy who sees money as his life give so much? You really have some tricks up your sleeves, eh? Never mind the money, though. You can share it with the rest." Jin Shi's grin turned wider and he threw out some flattery. "You're really great, boss." "Spare the bootlicking, will you?" scoffed Tang Xiu with a smile as he turned around to leave. Agostino realized that Tang Xiu was the most powerful character among these people and he quickly called out, "Please let me go, I beg you. I can give you more money if you think it's not enough." Tang Xiu's pace came to a halt. He turned around and smilingly said, "What do you think is more important, money or people?" "People." Although Agostino didn't know what Tang Xiu was referring to, he answered without hesitation. "You said people are more important, so use your life to exchange for 200 strong convicts in your prison. It's very cost-effective, I think," said Tang Xiu with a smile. "You see, money is just something that one can't earn without struggling. But losing talented people is a big loss. Don't you think so, Agostino?" You want to break into prison," exclaimed Agostino loudly. "You know, jailbreaking is kinda bothersome and a waste of energy for us." Tang Xiu shook his head and said, "Your second-in-command in the prison sold me 200 inmates and received $400 million from me. I think it's quite a reasonable deal. But for you, you can only become a scapegoat." Immediately after, Tang Xiu motioned for Jin Shi as the latter taped Agostino's mouth, ignoring the struggles of the guy as he begged and pleaded. Inside the prison, more than 10 prison guards kept opening the cell doors one after another as the prisoners inside came out. Though they didn't speak, the excited expression on their faces betrayed what they felt inside. They just followed the prison guards and walked down the corridor that headed outside. Soon, 199 prisoners had left their cells and walked quickly to the outside under the curious eyes of many prison guards. "Hey, Steve, what the hell is going on here?" asked a police officer in the prison. He had just come out of a female prisoner's room and had yet to fix his belt properly. He was looking at the prison guards who had just come out with a large number of inmates. The prison guard's expression slightly changed, but he quickly composed himself and formally replied, "The warden personally issued an order to take them outside to do something, and the warden himself is waiting outside now." That police officer frowned and said with a puzzled expression, "But these convicts are major criminals. Significant problems are bound to occur if you guys send them out." "All right, I'll send 2 squads to help you escort them." Puff. A stocky bearded Caucasian, whisker, pulled a steel nail from his waist and tore the police officer's throat, then covered his mouth and pierced his heart with that steel nail. Afterward, he kicked open the door of the cell where that policeman came out from and directly dropped him in while covering his throat. TSK. This shit just fucked a female prisoner? Did I just bump into some fucking pervert? Man, she's seriously injured too. Whisker looked at the curled-up female prisoner in the corner and uncannily smiled. The female prisoner was of Asian descent with a petite body and she looked pretty. Her face suddenly changed when she saw the tragic condition of the policeman who just raped her. She didn't even pick up her clothes to cover the sensitive parts of her body as she straightly jumped off the bed to the corner, picked up a chair, and smashed it on the dying policeman's head. In just a few seconds, the policeman's head had been smashed. Instead of rushing to leave with the other prisoners, Whisker leaned on the door with folded arms and said with an uncanny smile, "Really? No prisoner detained here is a pushover. Even a young hot chick like you is spicy and ruthless. You're not bad, lass. Do you want to leave this shitty hellhole with us?" The female prisoner looked up. She didn't even wipe her face that was covered with blood and brain fluid and straightly asked, "Leaving this place, as in, escaping?" Chapter 834, Taking Advantages from the Chaotic Incident. Whisker once witnessed Tang Xiu's combat force and despite his unruly character, he eventually succumbed to Tang Xiu's dreadful strength, hence why he felt fortunate and rejoiced to follow Tang Xiu to the outside, instead of being caged in this dark prison. As he looked at the just abused female prisoner, he grinned and said, "You got quite a good luck to bump into us, you see. But you gotta remember, we never met tonight and the one who told you that you can leave is not me, capiche?" After saying that, he no longer paid attention to the female prisoner and quickly disappeared into the stream of people who were rushing outside. The name of the female convict was Chen Yan, who used to be a vicious and merciless fiendish character as well. She lived abroad with her parents since she was a child, and then faced a tragic fate after the death of her parents when she was still a minor. Afterward, she had been adopted by a certain black force, who then trained her and eventually turned her into a ruthless character who could kill without batting an eye. Unfortunately, streaks of bad luck struck her as the black force she had been affiliated with was then cracked down by the government and she was jailed for being an international wanted criminal. After being sent to the concentration camp 1319, she was desperate upon finding that the prison was not women's prison, but a hellhole that detained both male and female convicts. She was quite capable of herself, but not very strong. It thus led to her being cast with covetous and greedy eyes by many male convicts for more than 4 years because of her good looks. If it wasn't for the boss of her cell, the 70-plus-years-old man who had covered her, she could have been tortured and dead. Despite so, the old man couldn't escape the threat from the prison's police officer. Without any means left to evade her predicament, she had been repeatedly molested and abused by those police officers. Chen Yan watched the stream of people in the corridor. She quickly dressed up, wiped off the blood on her face and then headed out of her cell. To her shock inside, she found those who were now rushing outside were all very strong characters in the prison. Exactly what happened here? She felt a bit restless and disturbed inside, yet she finally steeled herself and started to walk and follow the crowd to the outside. To her shock, yet again, they met dozens of guards at their posts, but they didn't stop them, and even let the jailers who led the group to smoothly send them to the outermost gate. "Open the gate." A police officer, who led 10 or so jailers, looked at the prison guards who were on guarding duty at the gate and shouted before handing over the forged pass check to them. "Where are you going with these many felons, man?" quickly asked the prison guard, who was in charge of guarding duty shift, with a change in expression. "Warden's order. He ordered us to go out to have them fight in the underground fighting match." "What's wrong? You want to go against Warden Augustino's order? Or, are you jealous of him making money?" "No, no, no. Open the gate and let them go." The electric iron gate slowly opened as more than 10 jailers led the convicts and left quickly. When the crowd stepped out of the prison gate, a look of ecstasy was evident on their faces as they ran straight to the front fast. Chen Yan was amid the stream of people. Little did she expect that she would finally encounter the day she was away from this prison. Her face was flushed red, full of excitement inwardly as she paced forward faster. And yet, there was still something that surprised Chen Yan. All the convicts who escaped the prison were unexpectedly heading to the main road ahead. None of them separated and dispersed. "Hey, where exactly are we going?" asked Chen Yan to another convict who walked next to her after she deliberately picking up her speed and caught up with her. The female convict looked at Chen Yan with a surprised expression and then grinned. "You don't know where to go? Didn't boss tell you before?" "Boss?" Chen Yan was dumbfounded. How could she know who that boss was? Being able to follow this crowd was completely due to the reminder of that whisker fella. After the silence for a short while, she hurriedly replied, "Boss only said that he wanted me to go out. He didn't say anything where to go, though. But I see that you seem to know where we're heading to." The female convict picked up her speed more and quickly said while running, "Then don't ask if the boss didn't tell you. Just follow everyone else and some people will meet and aid us outside." "Some people are going to aid us?" Chen Yan's face slightly changed. Seeing that the female convict didn't want to speak more, she suppressed the puzzlement inside. To her, being able to escape from this prison was the most important, to begin with. She could no longer withstand living inside anymore. Less than 2 kilometers from the prison gate, she could see 2 SUVs and 4 buses parked in front with the aid of the dim starlight in the sky. With folded arms behind his back, Tang Xiu watched the dozens or so jailers and around 200 prisoners who were approaching fast. As the prison guard quickly approached, he nodded with satisfaction and said, "You've accomplished your mission, and the vice warden should have told you what to do next. Take this, and thanks for your cooperation. There are $10 million in that suitcase as a token of my regard." An ecstatic look covered the constable in charge's face. He respectfully saluted Tang Xiu, and then quickly took the suitcase and quickly disappeared into the night in the distance along with more than 10 of prison guards. "Boss." 200 heavily sentenced convicts quickly gathered in front of Tang Xiu, each with fiery eyes that contained deep respect. They still didn't know Tang Xiu's origins yet, but they were aware of 2 facts. Their future big boss was very strong, and he was definitely a man who was also adept at trickery and schemes. Otherwise, who would have dared to purchase 200 prisoners from the world's harshest and most horrible concentration camp 1319? Who else could afford to buy 200 convicts? They might be dreadful characters once, but they were also smart people and were crystal clear that they had been purchased today and how much sensation and a huge stir it would make internationally. Tang Xiu happily nodded and shouted, "First of all, I want to congratulate you on being able to leave that place and come here alive. I also congratulate you on the more exciting future life you'll have. However, remember my words, that I'm the sole reason that can go on living in the future. All right, everyone. Keep the order and board your bus in turn. We'll soon leave for the waterway and boarded the already prepared liner." Mo paced 2 steps forward and said in a heavy voice, "Form 4 groups and board your bus respectively." A few minutes later, all the purchased convicts had boarded the buses. After Tang Xiu taking a seat in one of the SUVs, Mo strode to the car's window and whispered, "Unforeseen things happened, boss." "What accident?" asked Tang Xiu with slightly creased brows. "We just counted the number of people and except for Spectre, there should be 199 prisoners here since Spectre is currently with Jing and Shueisha to carry out their mission. So Spectre is not here," said Mo. "But from the number we just counted, there are a total 200 people here and Spectre is not around. We got 1 extra?" Tang Xiu wore a strange expression. "Yes. We got 1 more," answered Mo. "Take some men and cross-check the list," said Tang Xiu with a smile. Find that extra and bring the person to me. Understood. As the car started and left to the distance, Mo, who boarded one of the cars, and other members of the escort began to cross-check the list in 4 buses. Inside the 3rd bus, Chen Yan was feeling a bit restless as she quietly sat in the last row seat, with 2 female convicts at her sides. She knew who these 2 female convicts were as they held quite a name in the entire concentration camp 1319 for being vicious, merciless yet very strong characters. She even had witnessed one of them once tore apart the body of a black man with her bare hand, and thus added 218 years more to her sentence. That, however, was not the chief reason she was feeling restless inside. What she was worried about was that young man she had just seen was definitely a very powerful man. Even she couldn't tell whether she had been accidentally drawn into this huge incident was a blessing or a calamity. No good. Chen Yan's complexion abruptly changed when she saw 2 sturdy men holding the list and walked from the front, while counting the number of people and calling out their numbers. What should I do? Chen Yan's mood turned chaotic. She wanted to jump out of the window to escape, but the other convicts around her may not allow her to escape. It was very likely that she would be captured in a flash and be killed on the spot. He Xiong, who was holding the list, kept counting until the last row of seat. He watched the 5 female convicts and inquired with a heavy voice, "State your name and your prison number." Ivy Cody, 0001184. Candy, 0000634. Chen Yan took a deep breath and said, "Chen Yan, 0000460. Wait a sec." He Xiong looked at the list and after skimming through it several times, he didn't find the name of Chen Yan. His sharp eyes sized up Chen Yan and said in a deep voice, "Where the hell did you come from? Your name is not listed on the list of the purchased prisoners." Chen Yan steeled her heart and answered, "I accidentally saw a lot of prisoners coming out along the corridor, so I came out of my cell and joined everyone else. But I'm also perplexed, how stupid and confused I was to appear here." "You what?" He Xiong was stunned silly and many convicts around him looked at Chen Yan with a strange expression. After He Xiong collected himself, he responded and immediately ordered, "Come with me." "Where to?" asked Chen Yao quickly. "To see the boss," answered He Xiong with a deadpan expression. He made a phone call and the 2 SUVs in front then stopped. After which, He Xiong took Chen Yan to arrive outside the SUV's window where Tang Xiu was riding, and then respectfully reported, "Boss, I brought the said person." Tang Xiu glanced at Chen Yan and lightly said, "Get on the car." Chen Yan walked to the other side of the car with some worries inside. After opening the door, she took a seat next to Tang Xiu but didn't hurry to talk. She was so tense and restless inside and fully guarded against Tang Xiu in case this guy would suddenly attack her. The convoy then began moving again. Tang Xiu took out a cigarette from his pocket, ignited it and took and blew out 2 deep puffs. As he blew out the smoke, he slowly said, "Aren't you owing me an explanation?" Chen Yan's lips squirmed a few times before she shook her head and said, Well, I don't know how to explain it, really. I was at a loss and baffled why I brought myself here." Chapter 835, The Riotous Revelry of the Rogues. Everyone had their own opportunities, and if one were to seize this chance, one might be able to reach the sky in a single bound. Yet, for Tang Xiu, he did not expect that his action of purchasing prisoners gave Chen Yan such a big chance. Escaping from prison, yet encountering the path to become immortal. Having learned the whole story, Tang Xiu could only lament inwardly for the rough fate Chen Yan had to go through in the first half of her life, though she found good fortune in the latter half of her life. Although he hadn't read the file on Chen Yan, for her to be detained in labor camp 1319 showed that she was a criminal who possessed some strength and excellence. It's a coincidence indeed, so might as well let her stay. Tang Xiu cast a seal on her and spoke no more. At present, Chen Yan felt like she was dreaming. She had escaped from the prison by a strange mixture of circumstances and became Tang Xiu's subordinate. All of a sudden, she truly looked forward to her future life. Port of Portorua. A passenger ship quietly moored at the port. Even though the spotlights illuminated the surroundings like daylight, there was no sign of anyone in the entire port. Yishir-san and He Wuya stood side by side on the bow of the liner, watching the road in the distance. They are coming. As the headlights of the cars shone in the distance, the two men with excellent eyesight had their expressions stirred as they jumped and flew to the shore. After the vehicles stopped in front of them, they saw Tang Xiu get out from the SUV as they greeted him, "Boss." Tang Xiu nodded in response and asked, "Everything prepped?" "It's all arranged. All the crews and attendants are already in place in the liner and we can set sail at any time," said Yishir-san. "No hurry. Jinshir's team hasn't come back yet." "We'll set sail after they come back," said Tang Xiu. "Also, organize the prisoners we brought out of the prison and arrange them to board and wait on the liner first." Affirmative. Without much effort, 200 prisoners came down from the buses. Their eyes lit up after seeing the liner and they looked excited as they ran toward the ship. Escaping from prison was tantamount to going to heaven for these people to begin with, and this large luxury liner was something people really liked. Tang Xiu himself didn't share the joy of these jubilant convicts, nor did he care about them scattering about disorderly. He was perfectly aware that it was probably the last time they had a chance to wildly run about together. Once he found a deserted island and drilled them with inhuman training, these fellas would likely refuse to run as wild as now even if they wanted to. After half an hour passed by, everyone was settled on the ship. Each prisoner brought out of the prison had their own cabin, as well as their share of a large amount of wine, meals, and fruits. There was also a hall that was originally a gambling establishment for the liner's guests, and a lot of them had now gathered there to gamble. Nearly every one of them had a private small vault even if they had been sentenced in the prison, so they pulled their wealth out and directly used debt note as chips. The whole interior of the liner was now filled with wild lawlessness, filling the air with a pestilential atmosphere, so much so that the crews and attendants of the liner had to avoid them with utmost care. On the bow deck of the liner, Tang Xiu quietly waited for the trio of Spectre, Jinshir, and Shueisha. Time passed by and the clock now pointed to 4:30 a.m. as three lightning-like figures dashed from the distance, then stood in front of Tang Xiu after a few breaths. "All done, boss," reported Jinshir after cupping his fist. "Is Agostino dead?" asked Tang Xiu. "He has been shot dead by the cops of this country. Also, all the dozens of prison guards who escorted the convicts out have been killed in the fierce battle after they left us, so you can rest assured, we even joined in the killing. Even if some of them didn't die there, nobody could save them either." Tang Xiu nodded and motioned for Mo behind him and said, "Let's leave. Strive to leave the waters of this country as fast as possible. Once we enter the high seas, find a deserted island to temporarily station at. Uncut jade is worthless, these convicts we brought out of prison kind of need some beatings." "How do you want to drill them, exactly?" asked Spectre. "Except you, the rest must undergo inhuman training." Tang Xiu glanced at him and lightly said, "Of the 200 convicts we brought out of prison, there may be 100 of them who can last after the training." The answer made Spectre shudder inside and he was rendered speechless. Inside the liner, Gillen Toma quietly sat on the bed, watching the coast outside through the window. He was convicted and sentenced to 180 years in prison for his heavy crimes. He originally thought that he would die in prison, but didn't expect that he would have a chance to go on living outside. He longed for freedom more than anyone else. He had been rescued from prison, and even though Tang Xiu stressed that he had cast a seal on his body, he didn't believe it in the slightest. He firmly believed in the "I control my fate, not the God" creed. Being restrained was a situation he abhorred the most, so he had long thought of a plan to find a way to escape immediately after leaving the prison. Even if Tang Xiu had eyes and hands that covered the sky, the world was so big. He believed he could still enjoy his life free and unfettered as long as he concealed his identity and was low-key. I gotta escape. Gillen took a deep breath and sat up from the bed. He opened the door and quietly headed out to the stern. After looking around, he finally left the cabin and appeared on the aft deck after avoiding many people who came to the stern. You wanna make this Gillen Toma pledge loyalty to you? Humph, dream on. The one who can boss me around in this world isn't born yet. Gillen jumped out of the ship with a queer laugh. During the fall, his palm easily grabbed the chain hanging on the hull as he glided soundlessly into the water. Amid the curtain of the night, Gillen dived into the dark sea and swam 100 meters in one breath without break. Only then did he reach a dark area. Still, he didn't dare to lower his guard and kept swimming further towards the distance while trying not to make a sound. Whoosh! Whoosh! However, two hazy silhouettes appeared on the stern where Gillian just jumped out from. Shui Gui and Yi San exchanged glances and smiled at each other. Well, boss guessed it right. Some people think that the seal boss told them about was just to frighten them. They refuse to be controlled, so they will seize the chance to escape by jumping off into the sea when the liner is about to sail off. Well, water is your world, Shui Gui, so it's up to you whether you want to bring him back. Yi San grinned. Shui Gui smugly smiled. His figure then hurled forward like an artillery shell and dashed out on the water's surface toward where Gillen Toma was fleeing. He went so far as to directly dive into the water when he was only 100 meters away from Gillen, and went diving to catch up with him. Tang Xiu entered the interior of the liner and headed straight to the gambling hall. Although many convicts saluted him, it was nearly perfunctory. These fellas who just escaped from prison did that for no other reason other than dreading Tang Xiu's powerful strength, not out of respect. How interesting. Tang Xiu was aware of it and he didn't take them seriously either. He knew that bringing these unruly and intractable people under his control was not an easy task. He kept walking quietly to the bar and asked a waiter with a pale face for a glass of red wine. He gently took a sip of it and shook the glass as he watched the crowd and pondered about how to show them who was in charge here. Not long after, Yi San came to Tang Xiu's side in a hurry and whispered, "Boss, a prisoner has just tried to escape and Shui Gui is currently chasing him. He should bring him back soon. That will make things more interesting." A strange smile appeared on Tang Xiu's charming face as he dropped all the wine in the glass. He threw the glass to the floor and shouted, "Notify everyone to gather here immediately. I'll give you all 10 minutes. Should anyone fail to come within 10 minutes, I don't think they need to leave with us anymore." Affirmative. Mo and the other four nearby quickly disappeared from the gambling hall. Time ticked slowly as the nearly rescued criminals steadily came in one by one. Not including Spectre, only 195 felons of the 200 had come here when the time was about to reach the 10-minute deadline. There are still 20 seconds left. Tang Xiu stood at the bar counter as a Mitsubishi Army knife soundlessly appeared in his hand. "Get fucking away from this Big Daddy's path." A rough, rude voice came from the gambling hall as Chen Yan, who was late, staggered to rush inside with unsteady steps. Once she stabilized her footing, she glared angrily at the burly man behind her, whose upper body was naked and full of scars and tattoos. "Close the door," shouted Tang Xiu as the 10-minute deadline was up. As the front door to the gambling hall closed, Tang Xiu released his spiritual sense. He swept it over the ship and clearly sensed the three people who didn't come, then immediately shouted, "Ah, go and drag Yale Sass and Getty here." Roger. Inwardly, Mo paid a silent tribute for Yale Sass and Getty and headed outside fast. In just a few minutes, he had already grabbed the throats of the two men and dragged them into the gambling hall, then threw them in front of the bar counter where Tang Xiu was standing at. "Fucking assholes. This Big Daddy would have kicked your fucking balls if it weren't for your sneak attack. Yale Sass was famous for his fiery temper and as a man difficult to deal with in labor camp 1319. Stirring up troubles was something he liked the most. However, only a few people dared to fight him because of his formidable strength. Mo's expression turned frosty. He dashed to the front of Yale Sass before his feet sent out a lightning-fast kick to his face. Right at the moment that blood splashed out, a dagger suddenly appeared in his hand out of thin air and stabbed both of Yale Sass's shoulders very quickly, creating 2 bloody holes. Bastard. Bam. The moment Yale Sass spat out the profanity, Mo's fist smashed his mouth. Even if this guy had firm and strong teeth, several of them were broken at once. Kneel. Tang Xiu, who was now sitting cross-legged on the bar counter, only watched the savagely beaten Yale Sass and Getty with a cold and detached demeanor. Facing these felons who had drenched themselves with crime, he made up his mind to teach them a lesson and make them remember how dreadful and horrifying he was.